The castle loomed over the valley like a sentinel of stone and shadow, its towering spires cutting into the twilight sky. Inside, the grand hall was bathed in the golden glow of candlelight, each flame flickering against tapestries depicting battles long past. The scent of burning oak mingled with the faint perfume of roses from the courtyard, creating a heady atmosphere that made the pulse quicken. Tonight, the castle was alive not with armies or politics, but with whispers, stolen glances, and attention that seemed to hum in the very air. Lady Allura moved silently along the marble floor, her silk gown brushing softly against her ankles. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, and yet she felt invisible. Or so she thought. Her ember eyes scanned the hall, drawn irresistibly to the figure standing beneath the largest chandelier. Lord Damien. The sight of him made her stomach tighten with anticipation, and she realized, with a thrill she tried to suppress, that desire was a dangerous companion tonight. Damien's dark hair fell just past his collar, and the tailor jacket of deep velvet clung to his broad shoulders. His eyes, a stormy grey, held a spark that made her knees betray her, longing for more than mere conversation. Yet there was caution in his gaze, a hint of the untold secrets that lingered behind those stormy eyes. He was as enigmatic as the castle itself, full of shadowed corners, silent chambers, and promises unspoken. Allura's fingers tightened around the folds of her gown. She had heard whispers of him, tales from servants and courtiers alike, but nothing could have prepared her for the electricity of being in the same room. A servant passed, bearing a silver tray of wine, and for a moment, their eyes met over the crystal rims. A shiver ran down her spine. The game had begun, though neither of them had spoken a word yet. The music in the hall shifted subtly, soft strings weaving through the murmurs of conversation. It was as if the castle itself conspired to bring them together. Allura could feel every gaze that fell upon her, every heartbeat that echoed her own. But it was Damien who mattered. Slowly, deliberately, he turned, and their eyes locked. The rest of the hall seemed to fade, the tapestries and chandeliers dissolving into shadow. He stepped forward, the weight of each movement heavy with intent, and Allura found herself rooted to the spot, unable to flee, unable to call for reason. The air between them vibrated, charged with unspoken desire. She could feel it, a magnetic pull that made her skin tingle, that whispered of nights spent in forbidden corners, of soft touches in places no one could see. "Lady Allura," he said, his voice low, smooth as polished wood. "You move through this hall like a secret I've been searching for." Her breath caught, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had imagined words like this, dreamed of them in the quiet hours when the moon shone over the castle towers, but hearing them now sent a shiver straight to her core. She wanted to respond, to tell him she had felt the same pull, the same dangerous attraction, but a polite smile hid the storm raging inside her. Damien's hand hovered, almost imperceptibly, close to hers. The air between them was thick, the tension unbearable yet delicious. Every step he took toward her seemed to carry a promise she wasn't sure she could resist. And when he finally spoke again, it was as though the walls themselves held their breath. "Tonight," he murmured, "the castle witnesses more than just our presence. It will see what words dare not speak." Allura's heart thundered in her chest. Desire, once a whisper, had become a roaring fire. And somewhere deep inside, she knew there was no turning back. Tonight, the castle hall would not just be a place of stone and candlelight, it would be the stage for a passion that neither of them could deny. The candles flickered as if in response to their unspoken energy, casting shadows that danced along the walls like silent witnesses to the tension between them. Lady Allura's pulse raced, each beat a reminder that stepping closer to Lord Damien meant surrendering to a desire she had fought to contain. Yet, when he finally closed the distance, the air between them seemed to thrum with inevitability. "Walk with me," he said, his voice low, coaxing, carrying the weight of authority and seduction intertwined. Without a word, she allowed him to lead her through the grand hall, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the soft strains of music. Each step felt like a promise, each glance a confession. Even the chandeliers seemed to lean closer, as if eager to witness what was about to unfold. They moved past the long dining tables, past the rows of velvet chairs, until the hall's far end opened onto a smaller chamber, dimly lit by lanterns. The air smelled of old stone, wax, and faint traces of jasmine, an intoxicating blend that made her head spin. Damien turned, closing the distance so that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Her breath caught, and for a moment, words failed her entirely. "You feel it too," he murmured, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The touch was electric, sending a shiver that traveled from her fingers to the base of her spine. She nodded, unable to speak, her lips parting slightly as if in invitation. His eyes, dark and unyielding, searched hers, reading the mixture of fear and longing she had tried to disguise. "You shouldn't," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. This is dangerous." Damien smiled, a slow, knowing curve of lips that promised mischief and more. "Danger," he said, "is what makes desire irresistible." He leaned closer, and she felt the brush of his breath, warm against her skin, stirring sensations that left her trembling. Illyra's gown rustled as she shifted, the silk slipping over her shoulders with a subtle whisper. She knew she wanted him, wanted the thrill of surrender, the exquisite torment of passion that lingered on the edge of propriety. And yet, she felt the pull of caution, a remnant of upbringing and propriety that made her hesitate. But Damien's presence was a tide she could not resist. His fingers traced the curve of her wrist, light as a feather, igniting sparks where skin met skin. Every inch he touched seemed to awaken a deeper yearning, a craving she had never felt before. She swallowed, her eyes flicking to his lips, imagining the taste of forbidden indulgence. The quiet of the chamber amplified every sound, the soft rustle of fabric, the faintest intake of breath, the thump of her heart hammering in her chest. "Tell me what you feel," he whispered, his voice a caress. Illyra's tongue felt heavy, but the words escaped in a tremulous sigh. I've never felt like this before," she admitted, her eyes locked on his. "It's consuming." Damien's gaze darkened, a storm of desire that mirrored her own. He leaned in, his lips hovering just a breath away from hers, teasing, testing. The proximity was unbearable, a magnetic pull that threatened to shatter every restraint. She closed her eyes briefly, the sensation almost painful in its intensity, and when she opened them, she saw only him, only the fire reflected in his storm-gray eyes. "Then let it consume you," he murmured, and in that instant, the dam of restraint broke. His lips captured hers in a kiss that was both commanding and tender, a clash of control and surrender. Illyra's hands found their way to his chest, clutching at the velvet fabric as if anchoring herself to reality. But reality had dissolved, leaving only heat, hunger, and the intoxicating taste of desire. Time seemed to stretch, the chamber shrinking until it contained only the two of them, locked in a dance as old as passion itself. Every movement, every touch, was a spark, igniting a wildfire that neither could or wanted to quench. The castle, ancient and silent, seemed to sigh around them, walls and tapestries witnessing a desire that was unrelenting, undeniable, and deliciously forbidden. As the night deepened, the music in the hall faded into distant echoes, leaving them alone with the thrill of discovery and the heat of mutual longing. And in that quiet, heart-racing moment, Lady Allura realized that surrendering to Damien was no longer a choice, it was destiny. The castle's shadows seemed to stretch and twist as if alive, echoing the fire that blazed between Lady Allura and Lord Damien. Even the air felt thick, laden with tension and anticipation, carrying the unspoken promise of what was to come. She had never known desire to be so consuming, so insistent, and yet there was a thrill in the surrender, a dangerous, intoxicating thrill that made her shiver at the mere brush of his fingers. Damien guided her through a narrow corridor, the walls lined with portraits of ancestors who seemed to stare disapprovingly at their audacity. Allura ignored them, focusing instead on the warmth radiating from him, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with her own rising heat. Every step was a test of control, every glance a silent dare. She felt exposed, yet safe in his presence, paradoxically tethered to him and yet floating on a current of pure desire. The corridor opened onto a private gallery, dimly lit by sconces that cast flickering shadows across the floor. Ancient suits of armor and tapestries depicting battles long past lined the walls, but to Allura, they were nothing more than a backdrop for the storm brewing in her chest. Damien stopped, turning to face her fully, his grey eyes dark with intent. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though it came out more as a plea than a warning. "And yet you are," he replied, a slow, knowing smile touching his lips. "And here I am." Fate, it seems, has a sense of humor. Allura's breath caught as he stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. Every movement was deliberate, magnetic, pulling her toward a surrender she had long denied herself. Her fingers grazed the edge of his sleeve, tracing the velvet fabric with trembling curiosity. His hand brushed hers, a simple touch, yet it sent a shiver racing down her spine, awakening every nerve in her body. "You tempt me," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. Damien's hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "And you tempt me," he admitted, his lips hovering a breath from hers. "You've awakened something I thought was long buried." Allura's pulse quickened. She had imagined passion, of course, had dreamed of it in the quiet moments when no one could see, but reality was far more overwhelming. His nearness was both a caress and a challenge, a test of restraint she found impossible to resist. The warmth of his body pressed against hers, each subtle movement sending sparks that threatened to ignite a fire she had never experienced. "I don't know if I can," she began, voice trembling, eyes searching his. "Then don't," he whispered, his lips brushing hers in the gentlest of teases. And with that touch, the last of her hesitation melted away. She leaned into him, surrendering to the undeniable pull between them, letting instinct guide her as much as desire. Their kiss deepened, slow and deliberate at first, then urgent with the weight of long-suppressed longing. Allura's hand slid along his chest, feeling the strength beneath the fabric, while Damien's fingers wove into the folds of her gown, anchoring her as he claimed her in small, deliberate ways. Every movement, every touch, was a spark that fanned the flames of their passion, leaving them both breathless, tangled in the heat of the moment. The flickering lanterns painted them in gold and shadow, highlighting every curve, every gasp, every shiver. Allura felt her heart racing, every nerve alive, every sensation amplified. She wanted more than just a touch, more than a fleeting moment of intimacy. She wanted to lose herself completely in him, to explore every hidden corner of this dangerous, thrilling desire. Damien paused, forehead resting against hers, eyes smoldering. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice husky. Illyra nodded, unable to speak, letting the fire in her gaze answer for her. Yes. Every part of her screamed yes. And in that unspoken affirmation, the castle around them seemed to lean closer, its ancient stones alive with their passion, bearing witness to a desire that would not be denied. They moved together through the gallery, each step a dance, each glance a promise. Time seemed suspended, the world outside forgotten. In this chamber, surrounded by history and shadow, Lady Illyra discovered the intoxicating power of surrender, of giving in to the pull of desire that had always been just out of reach until now. The gallery seemed to shrink around them, the shadows stretching as if to hold them close, shielding them from the world beyond the castle walls. Lady Illyra's pulse pounded in her ears, each beat echoing the rhythm of desire that surged through her veins. Damien's presence was overwhelming, magnetic, and every step they took together carried the weight of something dangerously intoxicating. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her knees weaken. "You don't know how long I've imagined this," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "How long I've waited for you to step close enough to claim." Illyra's lips parted in a soft gasp, and she felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Desire, once a distant flicker, had become a wildfire, consuming every thought, every caution, every restraint. Her fingers trembled as they slid along his chest, feeling the strong muscles beneath the velvet coat. "And now," she breathed, her voice trembling with both anticipation and fear. "Now, what do we do?" Damien's gaze darkened, a storm brewing behind his storm-gray eyes. "Now," he murmured, "we give in. Let go. There is no turning back." His hands framed her waist, drawing her closer until the warmth of their bodies pressed together, leaving no space for doubt or hesitation. She shivered at the contact, a delicious tremor that spread through her, igniting every nerve. The room around them seemed to fade into obscurity, leaving only the sensation of heat, the brush of fabric, and the quiet intensity of shared breath. Every heartbeat, every movement, carried a language of desire that needed no words. Damien's lips found hers again, and this time the kiss was deeper, more insistent. Illyra's hands threaded through his hair, tugging slightly as if to anchor herself to him, while he pressed her gently against the cold stone wall of the gallery. The contrast of his warmth and the chill beneath her sent shivers racing along her spine. She was caught between fire and ice, surrender and control, every sensation amplified in the intoxicating mix of passion and restraint. Her mind spun, a tangle of longing and fear, desire and fascination. She wanted him completely, yet the thought of crossing boundaries, of letting herself fall entirely into the temptation, made her heart race with both terror and thrill. Damien sensed it, his lips tracing the curve of her neck, his hands exploring with gentle precision, each touch sending waves of heat through her body. "You are mine," he whispered against her skin, voice low, husky, carrying a promise that made her knees weak. "Every part of you. And I will take only what you allow, for now." Illyra's breath hitched, the words igniting a fire she could no longer suppress. She leaned into him, surrendering to the magnetic pull, to the storm of sensation that left her dizzy and aching for more. His hands roamed her back, fingers teasing the silk of her gown, tracing lines that made her tremble with need. Every subtle movement, every whispered word, drove her further into the abyss of desire, and she embraced the thrill of losing herself in him. The room seemed to spin, the shadows dancing like flames around them. The distant music from the hall beyond faded into silence, leaving only the sound of their synchronized breathing, the soft rustle of fabric, and the rapid beat of hearts that had long denied this hunger. Damien pulled back just slightly, eyes dark and smoldering as he searched hers. "Do you want this as much as I do?" he asked, the question a slow, deliberate caress. Illyra's lips curved into a small, breathless smile. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling, "more than I can say." He smiled, a slow, predatory curve that made her stomach twist with anticipation. "Then we have no choice," he murmured, before capturing her lips in a kiss that was both possessive and reverent, a promise of more to come, a prelude to the ecstasy that waited beyond restraint. And in that moment, Lady Illyra understood that desire was not something to be tamed or hidden, it was something to be embraced, wild and consuming. The castle around them held its breath, walls and shadows witnessing a passion that was unstoppable, inevitable, and deliciously forbidden. Tonight, the hallways, the galleries, the ancient stones themselves would remember the fire ignited between them, desire that would not be denied. The gallery felt alive with their shared heat, every shadow a witness to the quiet storm raging between them. Lady Illyra's hands trembled as they traced the contours of Damien's jacket, her fingertips memorizing the weight and strength that pressed against her. The intensity of the moment was intoxicating, each glance, each breath, charged with a longing neither of them could deny. Damien leaned closer, his lips barely brushing hers, teasing, tasting the hesitation that still lingered. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured, his voice low, a velvet caress. "The pull that won't let either of us look away." Illyra's fingers tightened, clutching at the fabric of his coat. "Yes," she admitted, her voice trembling, "and it terrifies me." A slow smile curved his lips, one that was both dangerous and knowing. "Good," he whispered. "Desire without fear is mere attraction. This is something stronger. Something real." His hand slid from her waist to her back, pressing her gently against him, the heat of their bodies mingling in a tension that made every nerve stand on fire. Her heart raced, mind whirling with sensations she had never allowed herself to feel before. The thrill of proximity, of shared breath, the intimacy of unspoken words, was almost unbearable. Her fingers traced the edge of his collar, teasing the skin beneath, while Damien's hands moved with deliberate exploration, tracing the lines of her arms, the curve of her back, igniting every inch with a fire that refused to be ignored. "Do you want this as much as I do?" he asked again, voice husky, lips brushing hers in a whisper of contact that made her shiver. "Yes," she breathed, surrendering to the magnetic pull. "More than I've ever wanted anything." That admission was all Damien needed. He captured her lips in a kiss that was at once commanding and tender, a collision of passion and restraint that made her knees weaken. Illyra's hands clung to him as if letting go would mean losing herself entirely, and in truth, she had already surrendered. Every kiss, every touch, was a spark that fanned a wildfire neither of them could resist. The room seemed to contract, the ancient stone walls pressing closer as if they, too, hungered for the energy between them. Lantern light flickered across their faces, highlighting the intensity in her ember eyes, the storm in his gray ones. Each brush of skin against skin sent shivers racing down her spine, a delicious torment that made her ache for more. Damien's lips moved from hers to her neck, leaving trails of warmth and fire in their wake. Illyra's breath hitched, head tilting back to grant him access, her hands threading through his dark hair, tugging gently, urging him closer. The sound of her quickened breathing filled the chamber, a melody that seemed to set the rhythm for the dance of desire they were caught in. "You are irresistible," Damien murmured, his lips brushing the sensitive skin beneath her ear. "Every part of you calls to me, demanding I surrender to this, to you." Illyra's fingers clenched at his shoulders, body trembling with the intensity of the moment. "Then don't resist," she whispered, voice breathless. "Take me, if only for this moment." His eyes darkened with a mixture of hunger and reverence. "Oh, I intend to," he said, voice low and commanding, the promise hanging in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. He pressed closer, every movement deliberate, each touch a calculated fire that left her shivering, craving, and helplessly drawn to him. The gallery was silent but for the sound of their mingled breaths, the soft rustle of silk, and the rapid drum beat of hearts that had long denied such need. Time seemed suspended, leaving only the electricity of proximity, the intoxicating heat of forbidden desire, and the exquisite torment of want. Lady Illyra's mind whirled, a whirlwind of sensations that left her dizzy, trembling, and entirely consumed. She had never imagined passion could feel so powerful, so overwhelming. And yet, here it was, undeniable, fierce, and deliciously forbidden between them, in the shadows of the castle hall, a secret fire that demanded to be unleashed. Damien's lips returned to hers, slow, deliberate, consuming, as if memorizing every part of her. The fire inside her roared, consuming reason and restraint, leaving only the heady, overwhelming intoxication of desire. And in that moment, both knew there was no going back, only forward, deeper into the thrill, into the passion, into the burning, delicious unknown. The flickering lanterns cast elongated shadows across the gallery walls, turning every corner into a secret alcove, every tapestry into a silent witness of their escalating passion. Lady Illyra's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Every nerve in her body screamed for Damien, and the magnetic pull between them had grown impossible to resist. Damien's hands traced the curve of her waist, sliding upward to brush against the delicate fabric of her gown. The touch was electric, a spark that ignited a fire roaring beneath her skin. Illyra's fingers tangled in his dark hair, tugging gently, her lips parting in a moan that vibrated against his mouth. Each kiss, each brush of lips, was a language of its own, an unspoken confession of desire, need, and dangerous longing. "You are consuming me," Damien murmured, his lips moving from hers to the nape of her neck, his voice husky with barely restrained hunger. "Every glance, every touch. I cannot think, cannot breathe without wanting you." Illyra's knees nearly gave way under the intensity of the words, the weight of his presence, and the delicious torment of anticipation. "Then take me," she whispered, voice trembling, "take me now, here, if you dare." His lips curved into a slow, predatory smile. "I dare," he breathed, before capturing her mouth in a kiss that was both demanding and tender. The gallery, ancient and imposing, seemed to shrink around them, holding its breath as if aware that a passion this fierce was not meant to be witnessed by mere stone and shadow. Damien's hands moved with deliberate intent, exploring the curves of her body through the silk of her gown, memorizing the softness, the heat, the exquisite tension that made her tremble. Illyra's hands roamed across his broad shoulders and back, clinging to him as though letting go would mean falling into a chasm from which there was no return. The fire between them was no longer subtle, it had become a storm, unstoppable and consuming. Every brush of skin against skin sent shivers racing down her spine, making her ache with a need she could no longer deny. The distance between caution and abandon had vanished, leaving only desire in its purest, most intense form. "You have no idea what you do to me," Damien murmured against her lips, teeth grazing softly, eliciting a gasp that was both hers and the echo of the castle itself. "I've wanted this, for far too long to hold back any longer." Illyra pressed herself closer, surrendering fully to the irresistible force of him, the heat of the moment, the dizzying blend of longing and fear. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement was a shared language, a silent promise that the night would belong entirely to them. The silk of her gown whispered as it shifted under his hands, the sensation intoxicating, maddening. Damien's lips traced the curve of her jaw, the delicate line of her collarbone, leaving trails of warmth that made her shiver uncontrollably. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, needing to anchor herself even as she let every part of herself drift into the fire of desire. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low, rough with need. "This storm between us?" "Yes," she gasped, tilting her head back to give him more access, more control, more of the delicious torment that made her entire body ache. "I've never felt like this before." His hands tightened slightly around her waist, drawing her impossibly close, the heat of his body pressing her against him, igniting every nerve, every thought, every suppressed impulse. The gallery became a cocoon, time suspended, leaving only their mingled breaths, rapid heartbeats, and the intoxicating intensity of the passion that consumed them. Damien's lips returned to hers, slow at first, then demanding, as if each kiss, each touch, were a claim and a promise all at once. The tension between them had reached its peak, a heady mix of want and surrender, and Elora felt herself teetering on the edge of reason and abandon. Every brush of hands, every whispered word, every shiver and gasp drove them further into a world where only desire ruled. And in that moment, surrounded by the shadows and echoes of the castle, Lady Elora realized that tonight was not just about stolen kisses or fleeting passion. It was about surrender, about giving herself entirely to the fire Damien had ignited, to the storm that neither of them could escape. Tonight, the castle hall would remember them not just for the danger of desire, but for the unrelenting, unstoppable, consuming fire they had dared to unleash. The gallery seemed suspended in a timeless haze, the flickering lanterns casting a warm, trembling glow across their bodies. Lady Elora felt as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them, Damien and herself, entirely consumed by the fire that had been building since the moment their eyes met in the grand hall. Every nerve in her body was alive, tingling with anticipation, desire, and an aching need that demanded release. Damien's hands held her with a careful possessiveness, yet there was a hunger there she could not deny. His lips traced the line of her neck, down to the curve of her shoulder, leaving a trail of heat and want in his wake. "Elora," he murmured, voice low, rough with need, "I can't. I won't. I can't resist you any longer." Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, her breath quick, shallow, as if even breathing too deeply might shatter the fragile boundary between control and surrender. "Then don't," she whispered, her voice trembling, "take me, all of me." His gray eyes darkened, stormy and insistent, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was more than a touch, it was a claim, a promise, an ignition that set every fiber of her being aflame. Their bodies pressed together, hearts pounding in tandem, heat radiating from every point of contact. It was as though the ancient stones around them held their breath, giving way to the tempest of passion that had erupted within these walls. Elora's hands roamed his shoulders, his chest, memorizing the strength, the warmth, the magnetism that made her weak at the knees. Damien responded in kind, his fingers tracing every line of her gown, teasing, testing, igniting her with the brush of fabric and skin. She gasped into his mouth, lost in the sensation, the storm of want that consumed her entirely. "You are mine," he whispered against her lips, voice low, intoxicating, "and I am yours. No shadow, no wall, no whisper of caution can hold us back. She shivered, surrendering fully, letting the fire between them dictate every motion, every touch, every heartbeat. The silk of her gown slid slightly beneath his hands, the sensation sending tremors through her body, pulling her further into the whirlwind of desire. Every sigh, every gasp, every soft murmur of their names against each other's lips intensified the fever that had grown since the first stolen glance in the hall. Their kisses deepened, demanding, urgent, a clash of hunger and tenderness that left them both breathless. Illyra's back arched against the stone wall, pressing into him, matching every motion, every claim, every desperate whisper of need. Damien's hands cradled her face, then slid down her back, holding her close, guiding, grounding, yet stoking the inferno that threatened to consume them both. "Take me," she gasped, voice trembling with the exquisite torment of wanting more, of being wholly unrestrained. "I am," he murmured against her lips, his tone both a promise and a command. The kiss deepened, slow and possessive, as he pressed his forehead to hers, sharing breath, heat, and the overwhelming intensity of longing. The gallery around them disappeared, leaving only the wild, unstoppable rhythm of their hearts, the fire of their desire, and the delicious surrender that neither could resist. Time seemed to dissolve. Every touch, every sigh, every brush of lips against skin became a symphony of passion. Illyra's hands moved across him, memorizing, claiming, losing herself entirely to the moment, while Damien returned each touch, each gasp, with an intensity that left them both trembling on the edge of surrender and fulfillment. Finally, as if the castle itself exhaled in relief, they pressed together fully, a collision of bodies, hearts, and souls, a fire that could not be tamed. Every breath, every moan, every shiver was a testament to the desire that had been building for hours, now released in a crescendo of heat, intimacy, and need. When they finally pulled back, chests heaving, foreheads resting together, the world outside seemed impossibly distant. The lanterns flickered softly, the shadows returning to their places, but the heat between them remained, lingering, a promise that the castle would forever remember the fire that had burned in the hall that night. Damien's lips brushed hers one last time, tender, reverent. "This, tonight, is ours," he murmured. "And nothing, no shadow or whisper, can take it away." Illyra's eyes shone with a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and triumph. "Yes," she whispered, voice soft but unwavering. "Ours." And in the quiet of the castle hall, surrounded by stone and shadow, desire and fire, two hearts beat as one, a storm spent but never forgotten, leaving an indelible mark on both the lovers and the ancient walls that had witnessed the passion of a night they would never forget.